Dragon Buster 2. This was a game that kicked off a lot of things for me. First and foremost, this was the very first and currently only boxed Famicom game I have. It is a Namco Famicom game, so finding them in boxes is actually really cool. They came in these really beautiful plastic clamshell boxes. I really want to start collecting them. And I've mentioned that a few times. I mentioned that during the first loot video I ever showed, and the garage sale that I happened to get it at, along with a lot of other things, was what inspired me to make that series. And I absolutely gushed about, once again, the fact that this is a really cool boxed Namco Famicom game during my collection tour of my Famicom and NES games. 2 videos you can go see right now, and I suggest you do because they're interesting. But while I was recording footage for that latter video, I started to actually play it because I hadn't done that at that time. Again, I got them in a large bundle. I never really got a chance to get to that one particular. And I'm going to be using footage for that. I apologize for triple dipping on footage because I'm using that for gameplay footage as well, because I might as well. Again, apologies, but that one really struck me as something I needed to talk about just before I completely forgot, and, the impact of the game kind of left me. Now, Dragon Buster 2 is, of course, a sequel to Dragon Buster. It was a Namco side-scrolling platformer dungeon crawler. I incorrectly assumed this was part of the Dragon Slayer series, like a spin-off. It actually isn't, and that's really the most I really know about it. This game itself is actually a little bit different, whereas the other one was side-scrolling, and I believe the third one, a game called Dragon Velour on the PS1, would also be side-scrolling, if I recall correctly. That's a game I've been looking for, but I haven't had a chance to really do a lot of research into. This one is a top-down game, and that actually really surprised me, because I was expecting more of what the original was. Now, presumably the story is about going through these dungeons and trying to rescue a princess and, save the world, much like the original game, except it's now from a top-down perspective. And instead of a guy carrying a sword, now you're a guy with a bow. In fact, this reminded me of an old PC game I played back in the day, like way, way back in the day. I want to say it was one of the Bard's Tale games, but don't quote me on that. But it reminded me of an old PC game I used to play that I thought was really cool. So I was kind of immediately engaged. And that initially got me really, really excited about this. I remember those old games and I loved it. Like, you were going into these dark dungeons and you wouldn't know where you were going, and sometimes you just had to shoot an arrow in front of you just to sort of gauge what exactly was ahead of you because you couldn't quite see. And it's very much the case here. And just like that game, if you happen to hit a wall, you'll sometimes reflect the arrow back into your own head and absolutely murder yourself. I honestly really, really appreciate that. It does feel like an old school dungeon crawler in all the best ways. And here's where this game really started bugging me to the point where I had to talk about it. You'd think that this would either be a randomized experience or a curated experience. You'd either run to dungeons that are completely randomized and you have no idea where to go, and you gotta find your way to the exit, or each of the dungeons would be handmade, and it's not really either. Basically, each level contains multiple dungeons you have to explore. Your key goal is to collect some treasures, defeat a specific enemy holding a key, and then find a door to escape and move on to the next dungeon. Simple enough, I suppose. However, it's not randomized dungeons, and they're not handmade dungeons. Sort of. Basically, this game's dungeon design sort of kind of works halfway. Basically, each area has several different environmental templates. For example, on top of mountains, in giant crypts, inside castles, inside giant trees, what have you. And each of these templates has, their own tile sets. These tile sets are then applied to one of, I believe, 2 or 3 permutations of an existing environment, but that's it. Basically, every tree you go into has a shot of being one of 3 different tree dungeons you could go into. Every cave has a shot of being one of 3 various caves you could have gone to. Every castle, 1 in 3 castles. And the problem with this is, and you can see this in the gameplay video I recorded of this, I ran into the same cave back to back to back. And it's not like the enemy holding the key or the items on the floor or the door to get out were in different places. You spawn in the exact same starting point, and everything else is where it always is. In fact, by the end, I think I managed to beat that 3rd attempt at that same dungeon in less than 10 seconds. It was really bloody odd to run to the exact same place 3 times and know exactly, okay, I gotta go left 1 room, up 1 room, left 1 room, kill the guy there, Go back one room, up one room, right one room, there's the door. You know, to know that, just going in because I've experienced it literally minutes before, is what immediately kills this for me. And that sucks because everything else about this game in terms of gameplay is actually a lot of fun. It's a tense dungeon crawler where you're basically in what approximates to a pitch black dungeon. You're wandering around in real time as enemies sort of patrol very small rooms in real time, but you don't know where anything is in relativity to you because until you enter that room, it is pitch black. It's definitely kind of vaguely, in some regards, feeling like a roguelike, except that everything is predetermined and then randomly chosen for you. Again, it's weird. And sort of like the aforementioned Bard's Tale, like how I enjoyed randomly shooting an arrow off into the darkness, hoping to sort of gauge by fire exactly what I was going into blind. You can do that in this game, and once again, that can backfire, and that's great. But the game tries to help you out a little bit in the sense that you're not entirely going into anything blind. At least most of the enemies. The early ones I ran into didn't, specifically the skeletons. However, the bigger enemies, like the dinosaurs and like the giant troll or whatever, they make a lot of noise, and that noise is audible well before you're within the room that they occupy, which means several rooms down or in the hallway before the room, you can hear them and you can kind of prepare mentally for them. That said, they still come at you really fast, and it's kind of hard to react to some of that, especially considering that your arrows are really kind of dinky, don't do a lot of damage, and again, you have to be facing your opponent to shoot them, so if they're chasing you, you can't really fight them running away. This game kind of needed a second stick to kind of make that work, and unfortunately it doesn't because it's on the Famicom. However, this unique concept of utilizing the audio to benefit your blindness in this game is actually kind of a hindrance to the game overall, but I'll talk about that in a bit. There are a few interesting things you can pick up in the game. Mostly it's just quivers of arrows, which I never really noticed myself running out of arrows, so I'm not sure what benefit they provide. Maybe it's just points. There were fairies that sometimes showed up if I killed specific enemies, and they seemed to heal me a little bit, from what I recall. There was a lava pool that when I destroyed everything in a room, it turned into a healing spring. That was a really cool touch. There's also, of course, the key that you have to pick up to get to the door. There's a few different things to make this more than just enter a room, kill the thing, move on. And I definitely appreciate that. However, I do have one other huge issue, and you can see it at the end of my gameplay video. I think the game bugged, but I'm genuinely not sure. It was in that same cave that had the lava pool that turned to a healing spring. I got curb stomped by a boss that just sort of came out of nowhere, and then I respawned. Okay, that worked out perfectly fine, except then I got trapped. Like, the environment was loading bits of the environment I'd already passed in an indefinite loop. And it does seem like the environments themselves loop a little bit, but there was literally no way out of this. I think I ended up spending like 2 or 3 minutes just walking in huge wide circles, not ever getting anywhere. Like, I genuinely think it spawned me into like this weird self-contained loop that was impossible to actually get back to where I needed to go. And if that genuinely is what happened, as far as I can tell it was, that is awful. Because that means the only way to get out of that is to literally reset your game. And that was basically the last environment in that entire round. Not good. Overall, the main gameplay is definitely fun. I enjoy the basic dungeon crawling. I enjoy walking around in the darkness and trying to take out my opponents before they jump me. I really enjoy searching for the exit before dying, like, you know, in really tense situations where there's still monsters around chasing me. You know, there's some really good action-y moments here that keeps it very tense. I love that. But it's buggy as all hell from what I can tell, and it's repetitive. This is the kind of game that is enjoyable for 10, maybe 15-minute bursts, but after that, you're probably just going to get bored with it. That's the biggest issue this game has. It's fun, but it needs more variance in its environments, in its layouts, in its content in general. But its core gameplay is certainly fun. Now, the overall presentation to Dragon Buster 2 is kind of a mixed bag. Visually, the sprite work is actually very, very nice. Although the environments, once again, they kind of blend together a whole lot because there's only 2 or 3 different environments I ran into, so even if you ran into different dungeon styles, they use the same tile sets, it gets a little bit old pretty quick. However, the individual sprites of the characters and enemies, really well done. I have to admit, I kind of freaked out when I first saw that giant ogre that completely curb stomped me and threw me into some sort of weird dimensional loop. And the dinosaurs were really cool. I kind of wish there were some more enemies in here. I didn't play this game super long, but still, it could use a little bit more variance as well, but otherwise, excellent. The audio is where this game really trips up, though. You remember how I talked about how there was that great mechanic of the audio telling you exactly where you are, or at least how close an enemy was? That's great on paper, except, first of all, this is mono, so there's no way to really utilize directional speakers or anything, which can really just make you panic and get lost, and it doesn't really give you all that much feedback in terms of audio. But what's worse, I think in order to utilize a system like that, they had to basically axe the entire soundtrack, because there's no music to this game. All you can hear is the pitter-patter of your feet walking around, and that gets real annoying real fast. Kind of clever they gave you footfall sound effects, but it needs music of some description. There was one little bit of music in this game from what I remember, and that was when I was stuck in that time loop dungeon, and I guess the game decided I was there too long and started spawning giant sandworms to murder me. So there is a timer music, but that's it. It has nothing else, and that's a damn shame. Overall, the presentation visually is fine, but audio-wise, it is like the overall gameplay, really just gonna grate on you after about 2 minutes, which is not really benefiting this game for how short it's gonna keep your attention. Now, if you want a copy of Dragon Buster 2, cheapest one I'm seeing right now, shipping included $10. And that's not horrible for a Japanese import, but you can get better imports for less pretty easily. That said, it's not super expensive, but it's not really worth it, honestly. I got this game because I'm interested in boxed Namco Famicom games. That was what the importance of my purchasing this was. And in that regard, you know, it suits my taste just fine. But as a game, it's not really something that's going to capture your attention for more than maybe 20 minutes. Because you're going to be running through the exact same dungeons over and over and over, and you're going to pick up on that pretty quick. I mean, I did, and I only ended up playing this game for, I think, maybe 10 minutes, if that, to capture footage, just to show off the game a little bit. Overall, I think Dragon Buster had a good idea and good intentions, but it needed a lot more time. It needed a lot more added to the game to keep it fresh, and it really just needed to expand everything it did. Because it is, at its core, a very fun concept, and it's actually executed not too badly. But its presentation and its lack of variance, and the fact that you only have 2 or 3 dungeons per environment type, really is going to grate on you real fast. This won't be bad. It's not bad for little short bursts if you can get it cheap, but don't pay more than a couple bucks, because Dragon Buster 2, it gets pretty dull pretty quick. But it had a great case, and for me that was enough.